I don't think I've mentioned this in any of my blogs, but I am currently making a staff. I just picked up a stick in the woods, scraped off all the spare bark and dried mud, and I've been carving pictures into it for a while. And so I figured I could make this next video some step-by-step bits and pieces of carving pictures into the stick. Because I figured it would be interesting to show and maybe get some other people interested. Alright, now if you're carving, and especially if this is your first time, you really want to make sure your piece of wood is secure in something like this. Definitely something like this if it's small. You just gotta stick it right here in the vise. But if it's really big, working with a big staff, I would suggest just clamping it to the workbench. But the first thing I want to show you is with this. So it would be smarter to use the vise. So the way this works is you gotta crank it. Gotta make sure it's nice and tight so that it won't move. And as you can see, I've got work gloves on because I'm using this to cut the bark off. And obviously these work gloves aren't going to do the whole job, so you gotta be careful when doing this. I wouldn't say the best job, but hey, I've only been doing this for a while. I'm still trying to figure some of this stuff out on my own, but I'd say this is coming out pretty good. And no, this is not a staff or anything, obviously. I'm just using this one for practice. Like if there's a type of carving or cutting bark off that I'm having trouble trying to figure out, I can practice on this. So that way, when I'm working on the staff, I'll know that I have it right. Right, and if you're carving your staff and you want to put some pictures in, first thing you want to do is make sketches. Like I just made a few small pictures on this that I plan to scratch into my staff. A bunch of them I've already put in, like a sword, an arrow, these 3 runes here that spell my name, and this. These lines that go down the top like in a spiral shape. If you can't see them on this, it's right here. Goes down this way. And I think what I'm going to do is make this wider. I'm going to make this into a single line. And the best way to do this is with a chisel, which works kind of the same way as I was using that razor a while ago, but I think a chisel will work even better than a razor. And if you don't know what a chisel is, it's this. What you gotta do is you hold this to the wood and tap on this with a little hammer. Not too hard, obviously. You just want to go gently. And the further down you hold it when it's on the wood, the more it'll take out. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is secure it with clamps. So that way it won't move or shake or anything like that while you're working on it. So the first end I'm going to secure is this one. And I'll do the other end. You gotta make sure they're locked in nice and tight. But sometimes when clamping one of these in, it would be smarter to secure a certain part of the staff than another part. because this thing isn't straight, obviously. So it might go up in a wave or something, and the part closest to the workbench when it's set in this position would be the smarter part of it to secure with the clamp, because it'll definitely stay in place and you don't have to worry about it snapping or anything. As slow as it may seem, I got some part of it done already. So now, to reach the rest of it, I need to keep turning it over. See that right there? That's a big spot that kind of sticks out because I went in a little bit too deep there. So when it comes to that, it's not always going to happen, but sometimes when you don't know what you're doing, or if it's just a minor accident, that can happen. So you gotta keep working at it to sort of make it equal with the rest of the carving. And this is actually one of my favorite tools, because this is the one that I always use to start out carving. So when I'm carving, what I do is I start out by carving a line with this saw. And then adding on to it with the very jagged blade on this one to make it wider and deeper. The only annoying thing is your hands will hurt if you do that for too long, but it's worth it when the results come out the way they do. And if you're not as into carving with a saw, a chisel will definitely help when working with these types of pictures as well, as I've shown before. And one thing that I think kind of helps when carving with a chisel is to carve the picture in with a saw and then use the chisel. One example being this sword that I carved in. See, right here's the hilt, the cross piece, and the blade. Originally, it was just a cross that I carved in with the saw, but it didn't look enough like a sword, so I used the chisel to make this blade wider. And if you can tell right there, that's where I'd cut it with the saw. So if you use the saw and then the chisel, it might show. But if the mark with the chisel is wider, then it's not as noticeable. The only tricky thing with this kind of stick is that if you cut into a certain part of it, like on this side, for example, when you cut in, it'll give off a bunch of wood chips when you rub it or something. So when you carve into the stick, it's not exactly required, but it's what I recommend, that you coat it with some glue, especially if it's wide, kind of like the way I just made this.